Sign the deed over Alexandra. It is just a house. Ryan needs the image. My father's voice was low, pressed tight against the humid air. No, I said. His hand connected with my face instantly. A sharp crack echoed through the reception hall, cutting the music dead. In that silence, something inside me didn't break. It snapped shut. It was the sound of a tether being severed. I didn't touch my cheek. I didn't look at my mother who was smoothing her dress. I just looked at him. For the first time in 29 years, I didn't see a father. I saw a target. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Most people would have cried. Most daughters would have run to the bathroom to check for a bruise or begged for an apology. I did neither. I turned on my heel and walked out of the ballroom. My heels clicked against the marble floor, a steady, rhythmic metronome counting down the seconds of their remaining relevance. I didn't go to my room to pack. I went straight to the hotel's business center. The air conditioning was humming, the lights were fluorescent and harsh. It was perfect. It felt like a server room. It felt like safety. I sat down at a terminal and opened my laptop. My cheek was throbbing, a dull heat spreading across my skin, but my mind was ice. I logged into my trading interface. Two-factor authentication. Secure connection established. The screen glowed with the only language that had ever made sense to me. Numbers, logic, consequences. My brother Ryan had built his entire lifestyle brand on leverage. He was overexposed, inflated, and trading on a reputation he hadn't earned. I knew his financials better than he did because I was the one who had structured them. I pulled up the ticker symbol for his company. It was trading high, buoyed by the publicity of this wedding. Perfect. I initiated a short sell sequence. I leveraged my own portfolio to bet against him, flooding the market with sell orders that would trigger a panic algorithm. It wasn't emotional. It was just gravity. Next, I opened the file on my family's debt portfolio. There was a clause in the private loan agreement my father had signed 3 years ago. A change of character clause that allowed the lender to call in the full principal immediately if the borrower engaged in conduct detrimental to the asset's value. I was the lender. I clicked execute. The notification bar on my screen turned green. Transaction complete. Notice of default sent. In less than 12 minutes, I had stripped away the financial floor they were standing on. They were still dancing in the ballroom, drinking champagne that cost $400 a bottle, completely unaware that they were already bankrupt. I closed the laptop. I didn't wait for the toast. I walked out to the private airfield and boarded the charter plane I had on standby. As we lifted off, I looked down at the glittering lights of the resort. It looked small from up here, insignificant. I didn't feel sad. I felt efficient. The war had started, and I had just fired the first nuclear shot before they even knew we were fighting. My cliffside mansion was exactly how I left it, silent, pristine. The glass walls looked out over the Pacific Ocean, a vast expanse of black water under the moonlight. This house wasn't a gift. It wasn't an inheritance. It was a fortress I had built brick by brick, trade by trade, 18-hour day by 18-hour day. I walked into my office, the only room in the house that was always kept at 65 degrees, and sat in my ergonomic chair. I didn't turn on the lights. The glow of my 6 monitors was enough. I opened a file named The Ledger. It was a document no one in my family knew existed. For 10 years, I had been the silent equity partner in their lives. When my father's first manufacturing business went under, I was the one who wired the $50,000 to cover payroll so he wouldn't face legal action. When Ryan accidentally destroyed a rental car in Cabo, I paid the $12,000 in damages before the police were called. I had paid off their second mortgage. I had seeded Ryan's first 3 failed startups. I wasn't just a daughter. I was their liquidity provider. I was the safety net they walked on while looking up at the stars, never once looking down to see whose back was breaking to hold them up. For years, I asked myself why. Why did they treat him like a king when he was a liability, and treat me like a servant when I was their greatest asset? Tonight, staring at the red mark fading on my cheek in the reflection of the monitor, I finally understood the economics of their love. It was the sunk cost fallacy. My parents were bad gamblers who had bet their entire identity on the wrong horse. They had invested 27 years of pride, public image, and emotional capital into the idea that Ryan was the golden child. He was their vanity project. To admit he was a failure would be to declare spiritual bankruptcy. They didn't hate me because I was difficult. They hated me because I was the mirror reflecting their bad investment. Every time I succeeded, it highlighted how much Ryan failed. Every time I bailed them out, it reminded them that they had bet on the wrong child. That slap wasn't discipline. It was the desperate, violent reflex of a gambler who knows the house is taking everything, and he has nothing left to put on the table but his own rage. They kept doubling down on Ryan because they were terrified of realizing that their entire portfolio of love was worthless. I scrolled to the bottom of the spreadsheet. The total sum was staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars wasted on appearances and ego. I highlighted the final row. I didn't feel guilt anymore. I felt the cold clarity of an auditor closing a fraudulent account. They wanted me to sign over my house to protect their investment. No, it was time to liquidate the asset. I wasn't doing this to hurt them. I was doing it because the math no longer worked. I was issuing a stop-loss order on my own family. The next morning, my phone was not silent. It was vibrating across the glass desk, a relentless, angry buzz. They had realized I wasn't on the island anymore. I picked it up, swiping through the notifications with a detached curiosity. No frantic texts asking if I was okay. Instead, there was a video notification. Ryan had posted a story. I clicked on it. He was standing on the beach looking impeccably disheveled, the perfect picture of the aggrieved victim. "Some people just can't handle other people's happiness," he said to the camera, his voice thick with performative sadness. "It's a shame when selfish family members try to ruin the vibe on the most important day of your life. But we won't let negativity win. Good riddance." I scrolled down. The comments were already pouring in, a chorus of sympathy from his followers validating his narrative. Then came the voicemails. I played the first one from my mother. Her voice wasn't worried. It was sharp, vibrating with indignation. "Alexandra, I don't know where you went, but running away like a child is unacceptable. You provoked your father. You know how stressed he is about this wedding, and you pushed him. You are mentally unstable, and you need to come back and apologize before you embarrass us further." I saved the voicemail. Then I saved the video. I archived every text message accusing me of being jealous, petty, and cruel. They weren't trying to fix what they broke. They were trying to rewrite the history of the breakage. They were gaslighting me, trying to make me believe that my face had attacked his hand, that my refusal to be robbed was an act of aggression. It was fascinating, really. They were doubling down on their narrative because they still believed they controlled the story. They thought this was a family feud. They didn't realize it was a hostage negotiation, and they were the ones tied to the chair. Their lack of remorse didn't hurt me. It validated me. It was the final variable I needed to complete the equation. If they had apologized, if they had shown even a flicker of genuine regret, I might have hesitated. I might have paused the algorithm. But this toxic, self-righteous escalation was a green light. It was permission. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was liquidating a bad investment. I opened my contact list and found the number for the senior editor at the Financial Times. It was time to shift from defense to total offense. Back in my sanctuary, the silence was absolute. No wedding DJs, no screaming fathers, just the hum of the servers and the rhythmic crash of the ocean against the cliffs below. It was time to execute the secondary phase. I wasn't just cutting them off. I was calling in the margins. I sat at my desk, surrounded by glass walls that offered a 300-degree view of the coastline. It was a view I bought with the money they claimed I didn't deserve. I opened the secure line to the private wealth division of the bank that held my parents' mortgage. I knew the loan officer personally. We had done business worth 8 figures over the last 5 years. "This is Alexandra," I said. "I'm looking at a distressed asset in your portfolio, the estate on Highland Drive. I want to buy the debt note." It took 45 minutes to structure the deal. I used a shell company to acquire the mortgage. I didn't just pay it off to be nice. I bought the right to foreclose. I became the bank. I became the landlord. I became the entity that held the roof over their heads. My father had slapped the hand that fed him, so now that hand was holding the deed. Next, Ryan. I compiled a dossier. It wasn't gossip, it was forensic accounting. Balance sheets showing he was using new investor capital to pay off personal credit card debt. Invoices for business trips that were actually vacations in Ibiza. I attached the short sell data I had triggered earlier. I sent the package anonymously to 3 contacts, a forensic accountant at the IRS, the senior editor at the Financial Times, and the compliance officer at the venture capital firm that was about to lead his Series B funding. I hit send. Then I made myself a cup of tea. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across my trading floor. The contrast between my environment and theirs must have been jarring. While I sat in a temperature-controlled high-tech fortress of solitude, their world was catching fire. My phone began to light up on the desk. Calls from my father, calls from Ryan, calls from my mother. They were realizing that credit cards were being declined. They were realizing that investors were pulling term sheets. Panic was setting in. I watched the screen flash with their names. Dad calling. Ryan calling. Mom calling. I didn't answer a single one. I didn't block them either. I wanted to see the desperation. I wanted the data points. I took a sip of tea. It was Earl Grey. It was hot, soothing, and tasted exactly like peace. This wasn't a family feud anymore. It was a liquidation event. 3 days later, I received a cease and desist order. My father had hired a pit bull attorney, leveraging the last of his social capital to find someone willing to work on a contingency that didn't exist. They demanded I retract my defamatory statements to the press. They demanded I unfreeze the illegal hold on their mortgage. They threatened to sue me for intentional infliction of emotional distress. It was adorable. It was the legal equivalent of a toddler throwing a toy at a tank. I agreed to a meeting. I didn't host them at my sanctuary. I booked a conference room at the highest firm in the city, the kind with mahogany tables that cost more than my brother's education. I sat at the head of the table. My father, mother, and Ryan sat opposite, flanked by their lawyer. They looked tired. The shine of the wedding had worn off, replaced by the gray pallor of insomnia and panic. Ryan wouldn't meet my eyes. He was vibrating with anxiety, tapping his foot against the floor. Miss Alexandra, their lawyer, began sliding a folder across the table. Your actions constitute a malicious campaign to destroy your family's livelihood. We are prepared to file for emergency injunctive relief unless you immediately cease your interference with your brother's business and your parents' estate. I didn't open the folder. I just looked at Ryan. Did you tell them? I asked. Ryan flinched. Tell us what? My father snapped. That you're jealous, that you're trying to ruin him. No, I said calmly. Did he tell you who his lead angel investor is? The entity that provided 80% of the seed capital for his lifestyle brand? It's Apex Horizon Group, Ryan muttered, his voice cracking. They're a venture capital firm. Correct, I said. And who owns Apex Horizon Group? Silence filled the room. The air conditioning hummed. I tapped my laptop, projecting a document onto the smart screen behind me. It was the incorporation papers for Apex Horizon. My name was the only one listed. My mother gasped. My father's face went slack. You, he whispered, you gave him the money. I corrected. I invested $1.5 million because I wanted to see if he could actually build something, if he had the resources. I wanted to believe you were right about him. I clicked to the next slide. It was a forensic audit of the company accounts. But he didn't build anything. Ryan, would you like to explain to your lawyer what misappropriation of funds means? Ryan put his head in his hands. He didn't use the capital for product development, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. He used it to pay for the private island rental. He used it for the floral arrangements. He used investor funds, my funds, to pay for the wedding where you slapped me. I turned to their lawyer, who had gone very pale. He was closing his folder. He knew the difference between a civil dispute and a felony. This isn't a family squabble anymore, I said. This is grand larceny. Use of corporate funds for personal expenses is fraud. I have the receipts. I have the wire transfers. I have the invoices. I looked at my father. You wanted me to give him my house. I own his house. I own his company. And right now I hold the power to put him in federal prison for 5 to 10 years. The room was so quiet I could hear my mother weeping. It wasn't a soft cry. It was the terrified sound of a woman realizing her golden child was made of fool's gold, and she was the one who had polished him. They arrived at my gate 48 hours later. My security system alerted me before they even stepped out of their rental car. I watched them on the high-definition monitors in my office. They looked smaller than I remembered. Ryan was wearing a hood up, trying to hide his face from a world that was rapidly closing in on him. My mother was clutching her purse against her chest like a life raft. My father, he looked old. The arrogance that had fueled his rage on the island was gone, replaced by a terrified, shuffling gait. I let them into the driveway, but I didn't unlock the front door. I met them at the entrance, standing safely behind the floor-to-ceiling glass wall that separated my sanctuary from their chaos. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the integrated intercom system. The audio was crisp, filtering out the sound of the wind and the ocean, leaving only their desperate, pleading voices. "Alexandra, please," my mother started, her palms pressed against the glass, leaving smudges on the pristine surface. "We have nowhere to go. The bank gave us 48 hours to vacate the estate. Ryan, the police came to his apartment this morning. They took his computer. They took his passport." I stood perfectly still. I was wearing cashmere. I was holding a tablet. I looked at my father. The man who had struck me across the face for refusing to be robbed was now weeping. He wasn't crying for forgiveness. He wasn't crying because he realized he had failed me. He was crying for survival. "You have to stop this," he sobbed, his voice cracking through the speakers. "I am your father. You can't let us lose everything. We are family. Sign the deed over. Not for Ryan, for us. Please, Allie. Just a place to stay. Just until we get back on our feet." It was pathetic. It was the final, desperate trade. They were trying to barter a relationship that didn't exist for a roof they couldn't afford. They were trying to cash in emotional chips they had never earned. I pressed the talk button. "You are not family," I said. My voice was amplified by the exterior speakers filling the stone courtyard. "You are a bad investment," I finally wrote off. I didn't open the door. I slid a large, thick manila envelope through the mail slot at the bottom of the frame. My father scrambled to pick it up, his hands shaking so hard he nearly dropped it. He tore it open. Inside wasn't a check. It wasn't a deed transfer. It was a foreclosure notice for their estate listing my shell company as the creditor. Behind it was a copy of the SEC filing naming Ryan as the primary suspect in a securities fraud investigation. "Read the highlighted section," I said. My father's eyes scanned the page. He stopped breathing. He looked up at me through the glass, his face gray. You own the debt." "I own it all," I said. "I bought your mortgage. I bought your son's debt. I bought the leverage you thought you had over me. You wanted a house, you had one. You wanted a legacy, you had one. You gambled it all on a son who stole from you, and you hit the daughter who saved you." Ryan tried to step forward, shouting something incoherent about lawyers and fairness, but he looked like a ghost. He knew it was over. He knew I held the evidence that would trade his influencer lifestyle for a federal cell block. I looked my father directly in the eye through the double-paned, impact-resistant glass. "You told me to give him my home because he was the man of the family. Now he can be the man who explains to you why you are homeless." I reached for the security console on the wall. "The price of that slap was everything you own. You have 5 minutes to get off my property before I call the police for trespassing, and this time I won't be the one leaving in handcuffs." I turned off the intercom. I turned my back on the glass. I didn't watch them leave. I walked back into the warmth of my home, the sound of their pleading fading into the silence of absolute, non-negotiable victory. It has been 6 months since I watched my father's taillights disappear down the winding driveway. The fallout was swift and total. Ryan is currently out on bail, awaiting trial for securities fraud and embezzlement. His legal fees have drained whatever was left of my parents' retirement fund. They are living in a 2-bedroom rental on the outskirts of the city, a place with thin walls and no view. I don't visit. I don't call. My silence is the only grace they will ever get from me. I walked out onto my balcony. The morning air was crisp, smelling of salt and sage. The ocean stretched out before me in endless rhythmic blue. For a long time I thought this house was a trophy. I thought it was proof that I was better than them, smarter than them, richer than them. But sitting here now with a cup of tea warming my hands, I realized it was none of those things. This house wasn't a fortress to keep people out. It was a sanctuary to keep peace in. I thought about the years I spent trying to buy their love with my competence. I thought about the late nights, the stress, the constant grinding need to prove I was worthy of the space I took up. I had built this life as a shield, terrified that if I stopped achieving, I would disappear. Like armor, you can finally take off. I took a sip of tea. I didn't need them to see me anymore. I didn't need them to realize what they had lost. Their regret was irrelevant. My peace was absolute. I had severed the limb to save the body, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't bleeding. I was healing. If you've ever had to build your own sanctuary to protect your peace from the people who were supposed to love you, share this story. You are not alone.